Okay, so my disclaimer is, I want to make it very clear that this presentation might not be a very laughing one, as the rest of them have been. And I had like a list of things that I wanted to talk about, but then I was like, you don't get a chance like this very often to like present, except for Com 101, and no one in Com 101 is listening anyway. This is time for you to laugh. And so I just thought that it might be a good place, since we've been trained in theory and rhetoric and all these things, to talk about maybe not so comfortable subject matters, because we're educators in a way, right? So here we go. Okay. So what I've been doing nowadays is that at home, a daily ritual for my father to do is get up, drink some chai, and read the newspaper. And he has like 6 newspapers sitting with him in 3 different languages. And I never quite understood why he did that. But now, when I downloaded an app called Associated Press just so I could stay on top of what's going on, and then I went online to listen to news, and I was faced with a dilemma, because I've never listened to American news before, and this happened 3 weeks ago. And I was looking at the news, and I was looking at all the different outlets there are, and the more I listened to it, the more it seemed like entertainment to me. Because I wasn't getting informed of the findings, I was getting informed of the opinions of these corporations, or whatever you might call these companies to be. And that was an interesting revelation. See, I told you it's not going to be funny, and I feel bad, but we're just going to keep going. So what I did was, my French professor told me to listen to news in French. So I started listening to news in French. And my first thought, thanks to Fox and PBS and all those things, was, wait a minute, am I being brainwashed by this French news? So I went to my professor, and he basically looked at me, laughed, and said, there's no Fox in France. So I realized that it made me think and wonder, why are news outlets in America so focused on delivering a message, and what Izzy just talked about and what Brady will talk about, in trying to prove themselves to be right and proving a large population to be wrong? So I'm going to talk about that today. That was a long introduction. So that's why I'm talking about these things. How many of you have heard of these words before? Yes? Yes. Okay, good. How many of you have not heard of these 3 words before? Okay, we all have. Easy a little bit. Okay, so what? So I'm going to talk about, first I'm going to start with microaggressions. So I was reading a tweet the other day, and Twitter is probably the worst thing to have in this crisis of world right now. But a tweet said, microaggressions are the reason why macroaggressions happen. And if you think about that sentence for a good 20 seconds, you'll have an aha moment and go, oh, that makes total sense. So I'm going to introduce, well, since you all know what microaggressions are, I'm just going to mention a couple microaggressions just so we realize that we use them in our daily lives. So one that came to mind was color blindness. So what color blindness is, the statement indicates that you're basically treating everyone to be a part of the majority, which happens to be, in the case of America, to be Caucasian. So an example of that would be when someone looks at me and says, when I look at you, I don't see color. Or saying, America is a melting pot. Those statements are categorized as microaggressions by UCLA. So why do we fall into these traps? Why do we look at someone who looks Asian American or Latino American and go, oh, where are you from? No, where are you really from? Why do we think that that's an okay thing to say? Why do we think that we need to categorize everyone into these little mini boxes for the sake of understanding, for the sake of trying to understand the other person better, or is it because of the news? So the third part was not read. Okay, that was laugh, everyone. Where we go? So that's a little bit about microaggressions. Another one that I found really interesting was second-class citizen, and I didn't know about this myself, so I'm just going to read out what it says. It says, occurs when a target group member receives differential treatment from the power group. For example, being given preferential treatment as a consumer over a person of color. So what this happens, how this is practiced is that I was in a hospital the other day, And I was really surprised to see a lot of Indian doctors and a lot of Pakistani doctors. So I'm talking to these people, and the patient comes over, and this lady, she's 32 or 35, and she just like smiles at the person, pretends he doesn't understand English, and then asks him where the doctor is when he's wearing the badge of the doctor. So that is a microaggression. And at times we do these things without even realizing them, and as students of theory and rhetoric, it's really important to identify and maybe counter that behavior. That's my talk about microaggressions. I'm going to briefly talk about ethnocentrism and xenocentrism. How many of you know what ethnocentrism and xenocentrism is? A little bit. Okay, well, Paul obviously knows. So ethnocentrism is making false assumptions about others based on our own limited experience. So everybody is ethnocentric, you, me, the person outside, because it's just something that's a part of us. And the question is, why are we ethnocentric? And the reason is because we don't understand that we don't understand. And that statement, I was looking at it on Monday night at 1:30 in the morning, and I'm looking at this statement, and I'm going, why don't I understand what I don't understand? And it's a really complicated thing to wrap your head around, but once you do, everything makes more sense. So ethnocentrism leads to misunderstanding others. We falsely distort others, what is meaningful and functional to other people's lives through our own tinted glasses. So why is this important? Why am I lecturing you about all of this? This is important because this plays part in, ta-da-da, present-day politics. So to solidify this definition of ethnocentrism, looking at present-day politics of the United States is really helpful and insightful. So what happens is that the United States has a past history of meddling in, and I'm using the word meddling very carefully, meddling in foreign relations because of the ethnocentric identity. So United States is often thought of itself as more powerful, more economically sound, the place where dreams come true, and then just generally better than other nations. How this is bad is that it dabbles in situations occurring in other nations, such as the Middle East or other places, and that just doesn't work out, as we've seen. So you'll agree with me on that? Okay. So that's ethnocentrism. European imperialism comes under that too, because that's like the first time we can trace back to it, is when Europeans thought that everyone was primitive, which included America and Africa, and they were like, we're going to change everyone, and we're going to make everyone more educated and technologically friendly and cultured. Da-da-da, it was because of ethnocentrism. Okay. Xenocentrism is, and this is going to be really short. I know Izzy's like about to pass out. But xenocentrism refers to the elements of another culture's being better than ours. And that happens in America a lot. Guess what, though? It only happens when you're comparing it with Europe. So people here will consider French wines to be more exotic and more, no, exotic's not ironic, more cultured and more classy. French breads are considered better. German markets and German fairs are considered more nice. Some Swedish cars and all these things that are produced in Europe are considered better, and that's a result of xenocentrism. Okay, how does this pertain to you? I think I've explained that a lot, but this pertains to you because it's shaping the way you're thinking without even you realizing it. And I think that's very unfair. And I realize that this only happens, at least in the countries that I've been, this only happens in America. Because you're not given the real news at times. Sometimes people, because they get such biased opinions, they just drop their interest in news because you might not even realize that you like the news, but you just don't watch it because it's so shoved down your throat. So this is important because you're being molded in a way very subconsciously, very unconsciously, which is affecting your real perception. So the biggest controversy right now is Muslims are all terrorists, right? And in some form or another, if I had a 5-minute chat with you all, I hope not, but I have a very strong belief that at the end of 5 minutes, we're going to come to the conclusion that one of us does equate majority of Muslims as being terrorists. And that's overgeneralization, which is a combination of all of these three things together, along with a couple other sociological factors. Why this is bad is because you're taking a brush and you're painting a whole part of the world with it just because it's convenient to you. And that is not okay, and in the 21st century, that should not be okay. We just had attacks in California a couple days ago, and nowhere on any American outlet did I hear the word terrorist, except for French media or Indian media, because those are just languages I speak. I don't know what the other parts of the world are reporting it as, but everyone else is calling it domestic terrorism. However, American media outlets are not. And that's something that, even if you're not thinking about consciously, you should be thinking about subconsciously, because it's such a big part of what you're doing, is the place that you live in. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.